George Sedano, Tim Kalishaw, Sarah Spain, June Lee. Oh, did you just move, George? Did I see you blink? Yes. No.
My collar.
You're going out.
Yeah.
He went. See how ridiculous that is? How a check swing decided the best baseball of the season, and how the terrible taunting rule reared its head again. And don't touch Brady. Hey, don't touch Brady.
Clearly don't touch my collar either.
Pop it, baby.
Oh. We'll see what happens by the end of the show.
From every angle, it's hard to see a swing. Can we all agree on that? And that being the call made by first base umpire Gabe Morales 100+ feet away. Just a brutal way for this series to end, no matter who you root for. It's a series I'll ask you in a bit whether it was for you the real World Series, but right out of the gate, June Lee, around the horn to you. Can baseball feel good about the way Dodgers-Giants ended?
No, because it's a real whoopee cushion of a way for the season to end for the San Francisco Giants, especially given how magical their entire regular season run has been. I mean, Mookie Betts himself admitted last night that Wilmer Flores didn't swing there. So when you have a season end on a call that's blatantly as wrong as that, it's hard to feel good about it.
Sarah, can baseball, how should they feel today knowing this series ended that way?
Yeah. I think, as the eloquent June Lee said, it was a fart noise of a finish. It just wasn't the way you want two teams that have won the same number of games, have similar run differential, gone back and forth all season long as potentially the best, to go out on that. Whether or not you think it would have ended that way, the fact that it did end on a wrong call is something we all will be talking about instead of the way the
Tim, can any part of you see, okay, well, I mean, he fooled him on a pitch, and there we go.
None of that, Tony. They come back from commercial for the bottom of the ninth. They show the shot heard round the world 70 years ago. You're hoping for, what is this going to be? We get the check swing seen by one umpire 100 feet away. Not a very climactic finish for this series.
George, you want a word on this?
Tony, the great Vin Scully said that this was the most important game in the rivalry between the Giants and the Dodgers. Dave Robertson talked about how nervous he was heading into the game because of what Vin said. And yet this ending had a similar ending to a great show like Seinfeld, where the last episode was just a complete flop.
The split between the Dodgers and Giants is now 12 for the season. So that's as even as you get. The Dodgers now have 110 wins. The Giants finished with 109. It was decided by gutsy opener strategy. Shut down bullpen pitching from everybody, including Max Scherzer. Cody Bellinger redemption, and that check swing that none of you thought was even a swing. So the question I want to ask, it's actually a two-part question here. Did the best team win? And will you think back on this as the two best teams playing what really amounts to the series that matters most this year? June, can you start us off there?
The best team definitely did win because you saw the postseason experience coming into play here, where the Giants had a lot of guys who didn't have a ton of postseason experience, and they had leaned on their depth throughout the course of the year. Guys like Darren Ruff, guys like Logan Webb. Obviously, Logan Webb pitched really well, but throughout the course of this series, a lot of the guys who struggled on San Francisco were guys who had not had postseason experience, and the guys who did succeed were Chris Bryant, Buster Posey, a lot of the guys who did have a lot more postseason experience, and whereas the Dodgers have obviously had a lot of postseason experience in the past as well. And so I think this is one of those situations where the on-paper talent was there. San Francisco obviously had a magical season. This is going to be something to build off of as they move forward. But I think ultimately on paper, the Dodgers were the better team throughout the course of the season.
George Sedano, do you agree with June Lee there?
The answer to your question, Tony, is yes and yes. I mean, Max Scherzer, by the way, went out there and got his first career save. The notion that the ending of the game would have changed the direction of the series, I find that hard to believe. It was an 0-2 count, 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth, and Scherzer, the greatest pitcher of this generation, arguably, on the mound to try to finish this out. What this does undermine is this is a win for analytics. Dave Roberts went out there and was getting criticized by everybody about starting Knebel over Urias, who had been fantastic for him this season. He went out there knowing that Urias generally struggles a little bit in the first and second inning. His OPS goes way down, or OPS against goes way down in the third inning. He played this masterfully, and it is a win for him and the Dodgers in analytics.
Well, I want to get back to the question, though, did the better team win? And June, I hear your answer. You brought up experience, postseason experience, well, and things on paper. On paper, people thought San Francisco was going to win 70 games this year, 80 games this year, right? They won 107 games. Games not played on paper. Sarah, did a better team win this series?
The answer to your questions are no and no. And I love how the particularly George, an LA guy, suddenly believes that baseball is an inevitability, even though we've been proved over and over again can't predict baseball. It wasn't guaranteed that Scherzer was going to do that. Yeah, that's likely. But it's also not the most winning team during the regular season that wins the World Series every year. If that were the case, we wouldn't have the playoffs. We would give the trophy to the team with the most wins. So no, this wasn't the World Series. Let's not disrespect the other teams that are still in it and have a chance to win. And no, the better team didn't win, because if you want to argue with me that over the sample size that was as long as possible, unless this had been a World Series, you could figure out one was better than the other. They had the exact same number of wins against each other. They had the exact same number of wins in total, except for last night on a one-run game that came down to a wrong call. I'm not saying the result is unfair. I'm just saying you cannot say definitively that the Dodgers were better than the Giants.
As the only one here who picked the Giants yesterday, I'm not going to say the better team won. I will say the more versatile team won. We talked about it. The Dodgers can scrap for runs. They can hit for runs. The Giants rely on the home run, and that's what happened last night. They got one from Ruff, and they didn't get enough. But here's the thing. Gabe Kapler fell for the Dodgers trap. When I saw the lineup and saw he was starting two of his left-handed platoon players just because they're starting a right-hand reliever, that was a bad decision. That's how they ended up with Wilmer Flores facing Scherzer for the biggest out of the season instead of Yastrzemski or La Stella, one of their left-handed hitters.
Back in.
Tony, baseball masquerades as a team sport. It's really an individual sport, and it came down to Max Scherzer versus Wilmer Flores for one more pitch. The percentages are probably going to tell you that the Dodgers are still finishing that thing out. I'm sorry. That's the reality of baseball.
And yet somehow your individual argument is leading you to say that one team is better than the other and better than all of the other remaining teams.
Because that's what it boils down to. One
not
more
whether
pitch.
Scherzer is better than Flores.
One more pitch is what it boils down to. And Scherzer's the greatest pitcher of this generation, arguably.
Well, then ask him who was better on that pitch, not which team is a better team.
All right, we got to go right here. We're not going too far. The Dodgers have advanced, and they'll head to Atlanta to face the Braves, who have home field after losing 18 more games in L.A. this season. Tim, what kind of chance are you giving the Braves against the Dodgers?
33.33% chance, Tony. People forget they had a 3-1 lead against the Dodgers here in Arlington last year in the LCS. It's not the same two teams. There's no Ronald Acuna, and they just lost Soler, who was okay. He wasn't great, but they're up against it. But their pitching did wipe out the Brewers pretty quickly, so it will be. It's going to look like these last games we saw, a bunch of 2-1 games.
I'm going to go 35% for the Braves, mostly because of the history that, even though some of the players aren't there, as Tim mentioned, but Max Fried has been incredible. The Braves pitching staff in general has been incredible, but Max Fried has shown us a different level in this postseason. He may have the best curveball in baseball right now when you look at the way he's pitching.
Lee?
I'm going to go a bit lower. I think it's 15%. I mean, I believe in the depth of the Dodgers here and the talent on that roster. But it's going to really depend on a guy like Max Fried, who has been one of the best pitchers in the last couple of weeks in the sport. And on top of that, I do think losing Jorge Soler is a bigger deal than Tim lets on there, even though his production hasn't been, out of this world because of that loss of Ronald Acuna Jr. That this team has had. They've really had to rebuild that outfield throughout the course of this year to get into the playoffs. But I believe in the depth and the talent on the Dodgers roster.
I'm going 33.33%
Repeating, of
for
course.
the Braves. Yeah. It's a combination of the obvious things like question marks in their starting lineup and some of the ways that the Dodgers are built like an all-star team with their multiple MVPs and Cy Youngs, but also because I've been spending too much time with L. Duncan, and I know that inevitably there will be something terrible that will happen to just
These
break
aren't
the
those
hearts
Braves
of all
teams.
Braves
You have to
and Atlanta
allow
fans.
for each team to be itself and
Of
be
course.
its own self and not go back to 20,
Till it
30
happens
years ago.
again.
Yeah. All right, one more story here. Red Sox, Astros. This is your series, June Lee. This is what you're covering for ESPN. During the season, Houston won 5 of the 7, outscored Boston by 17. So the question is, what will decide the series? But for starters tonight, Sox going with Chris Sale over Eovaldi tonight for Game 1. Sale's last start versus Tampa lasted 1 inning, then 5 runs. Start before that was just 2 1/3 innings. June, do you trust Cora's decision here to go with Sale in Game 1?
I think you have to believe in Alex Cora because over the course of his entire tenure as Red Sox manager, he's made a lot of decisions that kind of make you question, like, should they be doing this? And they almost always seem to work out, that even dating back to the 2018 World Series with the Red Sox. I think the Red Sox need to know what they have in Chris Sale so they can set up their bullpen for the rest of that series. Tanner Houck and Nick Pivetta really saved this team over the course of the last couple of weeks and filling in because Sale hasn't been good. But they need to know what they have so they can plan out for the rest of the series.
So even if it proves to be wrong, you'd rather know that you're wrong immediately so you can react for the rest of the series, is what you're saying. It's an interesting strategy there. For now, I'm giving it points. Sarah Spade.
Yeah, I mean, there's a risk to that, of course, because you use up a lot of your bullpen in game one. You have a shorter rest for the more successful starter that's now starting in game two. But I do trust Alex Cora. Whichever side of this matchup he's been on in recent years has won. And I was going with the Astros. There was a gut feeling of the evil empire, knowing that everyone's rooting against them. But the Lance McCullers thing is huge to me. I think that really evens out their starting sides. And so when I saw Lance McCullers was out, I decided I'm going Red Sox and Cora.
You yourself just admitted you can't predict baseball.
Agreed. But you asked me to, so I'm doing my job on the show.
Well, someone can predict baseball, just you can't, Sarah Spade. Tim Kalishaw, how about you?
Look, I believe Cora knows his team. I believe Cora knows the other team better than anybody. I don't like the move. I think Red Sox fans wanted Eovaldi lined up to go in games 1, 4, and 7 and pitch him all you can. Sale's mostly been terrible this year when he wasn't facing the Rangers and the Orioles. But he knows his team. I trust him a little.
And Sedano, knowing Sale had just gone one inning and got roughed up and hasn't really pitched a full season at all, you're still throwing him out game one?
Yeah, I am. I think it's a smart, calculated risk. You're talking about a guy who clearly still coming off injury and is trying to work through some of that stuff. But he was embarrassed the last couple of times out. Not just the last time out, Tony. So I think that plays in it. And here's the calculated risk. Worst case scenario, you still got Hawk, Pivetta, and Rodriguez you can go to if you just use him as an opener. If he's cruising, you let him keep going and gain confidence. I think it's really smart by Cora.
Kalishaw gaining confidence. 26 against this panel right now. But at least George, at least you know your decision went wrong early on in the show. You can now recover in buy or sell. 2 minutes.
Around the Horn is presented by DirecTV Stream, part of Happy Hour.
That taunting rule in the NFL that you all, I mean, the flag on Philly for taunting, 15 yards. And I digress. I don't want to talk about this.
Tony, the offense is way too predictable. And I know he was trying to solve it with wide receiver screens early on. Well, that's been blown up, certainly. And if you look at last night's game, 0 passes of less than 20 yards in the middle of the field between the numbers. You can't do that to a young quarterback. You got to give him that safety valve, that easy pass over the middle.
Tim Kalishaw.
I know this is Hurts' audition year because right now the Eagles have 3 top 10 picks in next year's draft, so Hurts wants to put on a show, but he would get a little help if you gave Miles Sanders 4.8 yards a carry, the ball occasionally to take the pressure off.
What's going on with the why aren't they calling runs? Sarah Spain?
Well, if you want to ask this question about the totality of the season, yes, he's asking too much of Jalen Hurts and he has not used Miles Sanders correctly. But I don't think this is the game to really drill down that point because you're going against the Bucs, who have the #1 rush defense in the league and a banged up secondary that's short at least 3 players. This was the approach I thought the Eagles needed to take if they wanted a chance to beat a much better team. Get really aggressive, look to beat them with the pass, and look to kill their secondary. It just didn't work because they're not as good.
Yeah, I'm concerned that this is part of a larger pattern of putting way too much on Jalen Hurts. He has 77% of the offensive touches for the Eagles this year, and he's 87% of that offensive production as well. I mean, it's putting that much pressure on a guy who doesn't have that much NFL experience, I think is setting him up for failure when you look at it in the grand scheme. And with all of the teams that are kind of putting this much pressure on quarterbacks this early in their career, I'm kind of concerned about Jalen Hurts and whether or not he's being put in a position.
Miles Samuel's there to help, 4.8 yards to carry, as Kalishaw said. Zach Ertz not there to help. They traded him away today. Tim, can you remind us who you had in the game last night? Because I recall flip.
I had Philadelphia, and people who listen to that go, oh, the smart guy has Philadelphia. I'll take the 6.5. And they won.
All right, would you stop? No. We'll move on. Chargers-Ravens Sunday. On paper, this is the game of the week. It's a 1 o'clock Eastern start time in Baltimore, so LA's got the time zone situation. And, of course, it's Justin Herbert versus Lamar Jackson. Tim, I'll put you on the spot right here. Who would you rather have Sunday? Who would you rather have for their career?
Okay, I'd rather have Herbert Sunday because I think the Chargers are better than the Ravens. I'd rather have Herbert for his career because one of the things that makes Jackson dominant, the 1,100 yards rushing, that's not going to happen 5 years from now. Nobody's ever done that in the middle or late in their career, and so he's going to be less of a player at that time.
Sarah Spain?
I would take Lamar because he's more experienced. He's proved he can handle any criticism that's come his way, and he's going against a guy in Herbert that's defense is probably not going to do him much help. I would go with Herbert long term because I do have concerns about just how long Lamar can be as effective with the run as he is without getting injured or run down.
Boone?
Yeah, I'm right there with Sarah where I'm taking Lamar on Sunday. They have similar completion percentages over the course of the season, 67%. But I think Herbert's going to hold up better in the long term given that his game is more dependent on being a pocket passer. And we've seen quarterbacks like Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers be successful late into their careers. So I'm taking Herbert for the long term.
Tony, the Chargers give up a league worst 5.6 yards per carry. That means if you're Lamar Jackson, you're going to have a big day on Sunday. So I'm taking him then, and I'm taking him long term. He's got, as June mentioned, 67% completion percentage. That's a big leap from where he's been. He has gotten better and better every year. To sit here and say he can't continue to grow, that seems silly to me.
It is on the surface. A 22-year-old league MVP, and everybody's like, I don't know if I could take him for his career. I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
Fire Cell 3, the push of the referee. I'm going back in on this. No technical, no suspension. There was a fine for Diana Taurasi. Nobody on yesterday's panel had issue with it. I'm sensing a disturbance in the force here. Oh, hello, Sarah Spade.
Oh, hello.
WNBA Finals on to Chicago. Game 3 tonight, Game 4 Sunday. Is there something you want to say, though?
Yeah, I love Diana Taurasi. I want her to be in this series, and I want the Sky to beat the Mercury with their best player and the GOAT out there. That being said, it's in the rule book. It says right there, contact with an official is an automatic suspension. She has been fined afterwards for what they called inappropriate conduct, which means it should have been a technical then, and it should be a suspension now. Doesn't matter. Sky are going to win tonight. They're going to neutralize Brittany Griner, which is going to be the key, and then they're going to go ahead and take the championship.
Kalishaw, have you revisited your opinion yesterday that this was no big deal and didn't even affect the game?
I believe my opinion yesterday, if I recall, was it should have been a technical, but I would not suspend her. I think there has to be a common sense difference between getting mad at a ref and making contact and being indifferent. You know, that person's kind of in my way. I'm trying to help my player up.
That person, the official.
That person's a ref. Yeah.
That you contact.
George,
It says
you wanna
get
weigh in
contact
here?
Common sense. Try some.
Tony.
Try some common sense
Tony,
sometime.
I love we've arrived at the place of the WNBA where we're getting star calls and star treatment. And Diana Taurasi, if anyone deserves it, it's her in this situation. But as far as the game is concerned, look, the Sky blew this one, okay? We can talk about Taurasi all you want. They gave up 56% in the fourth quarter alone. Taurasi got cooking in that fourth quarter with 6 points, 8 in the overtime. Yes, I know that there's a process here that her getting bumping into the official may have caused some of that, but the reality is she was in the game and they did nothing. They did nothing to stop Griner as well. It's on them.
June.
I'm with Sarah here. I mean, the rules say the rules. You know, the rules are the rules, and so I think Taurasi should be playing tonight. That being said, I think the Chicago Sky really need to play better across the board. They have more depth than Phoenix does, and they need Courtney Vandersloot to kind of be that spark plug, and we'll see how she looks tonight with that foot injury.
X Factor's Vandersloot for you, June Lee. Okay. Like that call.
Absolutely.
Sedano, Lee, back row, Kalishaw, Spade, up close. Let's go. Showdown in 2 minutes. Zach Ertz earlier, the rare midweek trade in the NFL. He's a Philly legend, 9 years there, had a touchdown. Cool if he could. Nick Chubb is out for Cleveland. Tim, what are the odds Arizona gets the W over Cleveland, gets the 6-0?
Both teams have a lot of injuries, Tony, and the key spots, but with no Chubb for the Browns, Cardinals make it to 6-0. Here we go.
Sarah?
I've got the same thing. I would have given the nod to the Browns if they had been strong in their running court because that's the weakness for the Cards, but I got Cardinals.
Way to make it interesting, guys. Split the point, move on. Showdown 2, Myles Garrett, Halloween. Tombstones of all the quarterbacks he goes up against in his yard. Oddly, interestingly, no Mason Rudolph. Sarah, grade the decorations.
I should be salty because Justin Fields is especially elaborate because of the number of times they got to him, but I love it. I think it's hilarious, and I love that Kyler Murray's is extra small.
Yeah. Timmy?
You know, 4.5 of his 7 sacks came against Sarah's Bears, so yeah, Justin Fields should be like lying on the turf. The rest of them, Miles he didn't get any against Houston. Houston quarterbacks.
Mason Rudolph is actually under the ground. That's where he is.
mausoleum.
30
It's a
seconds of
mausoleum in the back.
FaceTime. Sarah Spain.
All right. Game 3 of the WNBA Finals tonight. So many good stories. We got the Quigley-Sloot marriage. We've got Shea Petty getting cut a million times. We've got Diana Taurasi's new baby. But the best one is Sandy Bradello, the head coach of the Mercury, married to Olaf Lang, the assistant for the Sky. They drafted their kids to figure out who would root for whom. They've been living separately. It's so juicy. I love it.
That's going to do it, folks. We're in a 71 and a half hour break. Oh, baby.